zoologists and biologists and knew a lot about living animals and plants for that matter. So I said, I want to find out where he belongs because I've been at war with him all these years and I'd be interested to know where he fits in. Where do you start with living things? And he said, well, probably one of the basic living things in the plant area is sphagnum moss. And I said, well, what about it? He said, well, it just sits there. It doesn't do anything. It just gets on rocks and it isn't even slippery. It doesn't even hurt people. It really accomplishes very little except probably to the spores that it emits, and that's what gets a kick out of that. But aside from that, it seems to have very little to do. So I said, okay, well, we'll start there. This messenger does harm, so he must be above sphagnum moss. So we started up the state of plants and its basic animals. And finally we got to, he said, one of the lowest forms of animal life is the Valerian worm. And, well, what about it? What does it do? He said, well, it doesn't do very much, but it seeks light. Well, Leon's below that. So he has to be somewhere between sphagnum moss and the Valerian worm is where the directors of that day belong. Leon was sort of the third string Luigi Mayer of Jack Warner. Dreadful man. Wilson Meisner was a great writer, very marvelously venomous tongue. And he said, Jack Warner, working for Jack Warner is like screwing a porcupine. He says, it's one friend against 100. You can see how well educated you're going to get about animation. Because this lady came outrageously in and she said that she said that one of the keepers there, she was looking at the porcupines and she said, she asked them how they could tell the difference between the male and female porcupine. And he said, well, he said the male porcupine had much shorter pricks than the female. And she was outraged, and she came running up and said, how dare he talk that evilly to you? And we use that term generally for the oils. That's jargon around the pricks. So he said, so it is really true that they're slightly different length. As a matter of fact, the pricks are only about that long. This is how we can start a lecture. I've got a little culture going for me first. When I came into the business, I really came in 1931, and which means that I came, I think, 17 years old, something like that. And no, 18, 19, whatever. It was a time of very young people, and fortunately for us, what's happening in Disney and so on, and obviously here too, is that we're starting up again. During that terrible drought that occurred for about 20 years, they were starting when Hanna-Barbera did what they called modern animation. They refused the term limited. They called it modern, which was a good thing. It meant that they weren't cheating children, and they were doing something modern. So as you know, there was a long drought and nothing really happened in animation. And I'm glad to say today, so particularly from Cal Arts, that the people that did the Little Mermaid and Oliver and the Red Mouse Detective are all young people, most of them in their 20s and 30s, and which for me is really young. I was going to say, I'm going to say this line for tomorrow, but I love it so much. Oliver Wendell Holmes, I'm beginning to understand what he meant. Because I'm 78, I'll be 79 on Saturday. And when he was 90 years old, he was walking down the street with a friend, and a friend of an equal age, and this pretty little girl walked across the lane and said, "I want to be 70 again." So all these young people came into the studio, and we had this idiot, this terrible director, but fortunately, this producer. Fortunately for us, Leon wasn't terribly bright, as I said in the but the thing that seemed to be the most horrible thing that ever happened to us actually turned out to be one of the most important disciplines that we learned from. And that was this, that when we first started making animated cartoons, the salaries were so low that it really didn't matter whether the picture ran 7 or 8 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever. So they sort of swapped over the edge, and there was no implicit discipline as time, implicit time to get a blank. Well, I know you yearn for days like that, but the trouble with that is that if you have extra time, you're liable to use it, and you're almost certain to use it badly. The disciplines are vital and necessary. I know that a number of years ago, I came out of a play on Broadway, and I figured the play was as long as I cared. Nobody cared about how long it was. And so when I came out, I tried to get a taxi cab, and I looked around, I couldn't get a taxi cab, and I realized it's a small theater. And I looked around, all of the theaters were letting out at the same time. Now that was news. That was very interesting news. I didn't realize that aside from certain of the long-winded people, that a play does run an exquisite amount of time. And a good play will run, I guess, an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours. And so that it's all the theaters do about it. So the discipline is existing. Of course, the whole thing about motion pictures and animation, included in animation, of course, is that the discipline of time. Time is all there is. When you compare any other form of graphic art with animation, you realize we've added something to time. Painting is a fixed thing. Comic strip is a fixed thing, right? It's there, and really, it's very important to develop a style. We'll talk about that later. But in animation, because you have to be so varied, going through the studio, you see how many times you have to shift gears and move from role to role, like a good actor does. Alec Guinness, who knows what Alec Guinness is like when he's not acting? He's not Cary Grant or somebody like that. He's Alec Guinness, he becomes that part. And that's what you have to do, that's what we have to do. Getting back to Leon, after a while, when the animators began to get so good that there was a demand for the studios. So Leon, as I said, it wasn't terribly bright. Realized that if you made the picture shorter, it wouldn't cost as much. So, brilliant. So he started cutting them back, and I think he would have cut them back for maybe 2 minutes. He'd been able to get away with it. But after a while, he got down to the place where the exhibitors suddenly said, it has to be 6 minutes. Because we want to put together a program, a 2-hour program, composed of features for shorter programs, and what we call coming attractions, a newsreel, and something else. And not to a 2-hour package, and so we need them. They can be longer than 6 minutes, but they can't be shorter. Well, that was a terrible thing.